Hello friends, welcome back to CSharp.net online training video series. Today we are going to discuss how to implement multiple catch block in C Sharp to handle different types of exception for a single try block with examples. Please watch our previous video where we discuss the basic concept of exception handling. What is exception handling? What are the different types of errors? Right? How to implement exception handling using logical implementation? How we can handle exception using try catch implementation, right? All these things we have discussed in our previous video. Today what we are going to discuss? Today we are going to discuss three things. What are the things? First, we will discuss how to implement multiple catch blocks. Then we will discuss, is it possible to catch all types of exception using a single catch block? Yes, that is possible. We will see how. Then we will discuss when should we write multiple catch block for a single try block. If we can handle all the exception using a single catch block, then at what scenario then or why we should write multiple catch block for a given try block, that we will also discuss, right? So let us understand how to implement multiple catch block. First of all, can we implement multiple catch block for a single try block? Yes, we can implement multiple catch block for a single try block, right? So it is possible in C Sharp to write multiple catch block for a given try block. If you are a try block, so for in your application, so inside one method, if you are writing a try block, right, for that try block, it is also possible that you can write multiple catch block. When we implement multiple catch block for a given try block, then at any given point of time, only one catch block is going to be executed, right? So if for a given try block, if you are writing 5 catch block, then at any point of time, only one catch block is going to execute, or it is not mandatory, or it is not guaranteed that catch block is going to execute. If execute, that is fine. If not execute, that is also fine. But once one catch block is executed, then the rest other catch blocks are going to be simply ignored. So the point that you need to remember is it is not possible to execute two catch block at the same time, right, for a given try block. With this keep in mind, let us proceed and try to understand how to implement multiple catch block with one example. Let me copy the code, right? So you can see this is a simple class, and in this simple class I am creating three variables, number one, number two, and the result. So what is my intention is, my intention, I will take two number from the user, that is number one and number two. I'm storing the first number in number one variable and number two in number variable, and I'm expecting while running the application the user should enter only numeric values, right? Then I'm doing the division operation. After performing the division operation, I'm storing the result in the result variable, and then simply printing the value what is stored in the result variable. So at the time of program execution, there might be some situation where we'll get some kind of exception. If we are entering the second number as 0, then we will get this divide by 0 exception, right? At that time, this catch block is going to handle that exception, right? And this statement is going to be printed on the console. Suppose instead of entering any number, suppose we are enter any string value, right? Or we entered any alphanumeric value, then at that time, that string value or that alphanumeric value is unable to parse to integer type, right? So at that time, what exception we will get? We'll get a format exception. So in that scenario, this catch block is going to be executed. So at any point of time, whenever we are having some logical mistake, right? That might be this division error, or that might be this format exception. Then what CLR does? CLR will first identify what is the logical mistake. Yes, the logical mistake is divide by 0. Then what CLR will do? CLR will try to figure out what logical mistake and try to find out what class, what exception class is there to handle this logical mistake. Then he will find out, yes, divide by 0 exception class is there. Then he will create an instance of a divide by 0 exception class. How to create an instance? The same process, new, then followed by the class name, right? So once he create the instance, then it will throw that instance. So once the CLR will throw that instance, from where it will throw the instance, the statement, the line where we got the logical mistake, at the same line only it will throw the exception, right? Uh, Further executing rest of the line. So if the exception is thrown from line number 15, means line number 16 is not going to be executed. So once the CLR throw the exception, then it will search the first catch block. Is the first catch block catch that exception? Yes, divide by 0 exception. can catch that exception. So it will execute this catch block, and once it executes the catch block, the further catch block it is not going to be executed, right? This catch block is simply going to be ignored, right? And after executing this catch block, the control will come to the statement which is placed after the end of the all catch block, right? Now suppose while running the application, instead of integer number, you entered a string value called, for example, hello, for example, abc, any kind of a string value that might that should not converted to an integer number. If you enter that, then that is not going to be converted to integer. So in this case, suppose for while entering the first number, you entered abc. So from the ABC means this is the line number 12. So from this line number 12, we are doing some logical mistake, right? What mistake? Now we are instead of entering an integer number, we are entering other instead of entering an integer number, we are entering a string value. That is ABC, which is not possible to convert it to integer type. Then what CLR will do is CLR will first identify what type of logical mistake, format exception, right? Wrong format we are entering. So it will check, is there any classes available to handle that exception? Yes, one class is available. What class? Format exception. So CLR will create an instance of that format exception class, and once he create the instance from this line number 12 only, he will throw that exception, right? Throw that exception means it will throw that object, right? So that once you throw that object, so the CLR will controller will come to the first catch block, and it will check, is the what exception we are throwing from the try block, is that exception is going to be handled by this catch block? No, because this is divided by zero exception, and we are throwing format exception, and this divided by zero exception is not that type, or even this divided by zero exception is not the parent class of that format exception. So this catch block cannot handle that. Then it will come to the next catch block, and it will check, is that parameter what we are passing in this catch block can handle that exception? Yes, it can handle, because the type is format exception, and what controller throwing from this line number 12 is format exception. So the catch block is found, right? So the statement what you have written inside the catch block, that statement is going to be executed, and after executing it will come out to the end. That means after all the catch block, what statement is there, that statement is going to be executed. So in this way we can place multiple catch block for a single try block, but at any given point of time only one catch block is going to be executed. Further what happened? Now suppose I'm entering, instead of I'm entering one integer number, but that number is a very big one, right? So that number cannot be stored inside this integer in 32 variable, right? Then at that time what will happen? So at that time, this exception class, this catch class cannot handle that overflow exception. Even this format class cannot also handle that format exception. If none of the catch block handle that throwing exception, then again it's going to be a abnormal termination. Let us see all these three scenario examples, right? So we have already written the example. Let us run the application and see the scenarios one by one. So first scenario, I'm going to enter the corrected data. Corrected data means I'm going to enter two integer number. I'm not entering the second number as 0. So I'm entering 10 and 2. You can see we are getting the result as 5. That is fine. Now, again, I'm running the application, and this time I'm entering the number as 0. Okay. So as this time I'm entering the number as 0, I'm giving the breakpoint here, right? So number as 0 means at this line number 15, will get some kind of exception. So once the exception is occurred, right? Once the logical implementation is there, and if the compiler or if the CLR found that this is a issue, this is one runtime error, then from that line only it will throw the exception, right? What type of exception it should throw now? Divided by 0 exception. Then is there any catch block which can handle? Yes. Let's see, I'm pressing the enter, and as soon as I press enter, the controller come to this statement only, right? So it will come to this statement. It will check whether that catch block handled that exception. Yes, the catch block handles. It will go inside the catch block and it will execute the statement. But after executing the statement, it will not execute, or even it will not check the next catch block. See, it will directly come out from the last catch block. That is fine, right? So now you can see the second number should not be 0. That is fine. Now I'm going to test the third scenario. I'm entering the number as 1 1 ABC. So in this case, this is an alphanumeric value. As an alphanumeric value, it cannot be converted to integer. So from line number, okay, let me put I'm putting the console statement in line number 13. but you will see that this statement is never going to be executed. Why? Because from line number 12 only it will throw the exception. Once it will throw the exception, the controller will come to the second catch block, right? Let's see. Okay, I just press enter and you can see the controller directly come to the second catch block, because this is the catch. This catch block cannot handle that exception. Even I'm putting the breakpoint, you can see this catch block is not going to be hit, right? Not going to be checked also, right? So directly come to this catch block and it will come inside the body of the catch block. It will execute the statement and then it will come out and you can see enter only integer numbers. Now that is fine. Now what I'm trying to show you is, now okay, so what so I'm entering one integer number 1, 2, 3. But the second integer number, you can see, once I enter, so it will execute, it will come to the next line. Okay, let's press Control F5, right? So once I press F5, it will ask me to enter the second number. So now what I'm trying to enter, I'm entering a big integer number, which is not going to be stored in int32 variable. So in this case, what kind of exception we will get? We will get overflow exception. But is there any cache block which can handle overflow exception? No, there is no cache block which can handle overflow exception. So if there is no cache block which can handle this exception, then you will see we will have abnormal termination, right? See, I'm pressing enter and I'm getting that abnormal termination. The program execution terminated abnormally. What exception it is showing? System overflow exception. Value was either too large or too small for int32. For int32, what value I'm entering, that is very big. So you cannot store that value under this int32 variable. So you can see the program execution stopped. So this is how you can implement multiple catch blocks, right? Now, so the syntax is what? Now see, okay, so we'll come to that point later. Is it possible to catch all exception using a single catch block? Yes. It is also possible to catch all the exception using a single catch block. How? Okay, let me comment these two catch block. Let me create a generic catch block, right? Okay, let me copy the code from here only, right? So what I'm trying to do, I'm creating a generic catch block. So when I'm creating the generic catch block in the sense, if I'm creating the catch block which exception class, right, then it is going to be a generic catch block. So what is exception class? Now this exception class is the parent of all exception classes. So simply speaking, we have two types of exception classes. One is a system exception, right? And another one is application exception. So let me go to the system exception class, and if I go to the system exception class, you will see that this class is inherited from the exception class, right? Now if I uncomment this, and if I go to divide by zero exception class, then you will see that it is inherited from arithmetic exception class. And if you go to the format exception class, then you will see that it is inherited from system exception class. Right? If divide by zero exception is inherited from arithmetic exception class. Now, if you go to the arithmetic exception class, then you will see that this class is inherited from system exception, and system exception is inherited from which class? Exception class. That means directly or indirectly, any exception class you use, that the parent class is going to be only the exception class. Apart from system exception class, we have another kind of exception class which is called application exception, right? Again, application exception, the parent is going to be exception class. So what are system exception class? What are application exception class, right? We'll discuss in the upcoming video when we will discuss about custom exception. So at that time, I will explain you what are the different types of exception classes, what is system exception class, what is application exception class, right? All these things we are going to discuss. But for now, you have to remember, this is nothing but your parent class, right? So this is nothing but your parent class. As it is the parent class, so one of the inheritance rule we have already discussed, that parent class reference variable can hold child class object, right? So child class instance we can store inside the parent reference variable, right? Now, as this is the catch block, which is nothing but exception type, means it is the parent catch block. So any type of exception you throw from the try block, that is going to be handled by the catch block, because any exception you throw, that definitely going to be a child of this class, right? Child of this exception class. As exception is the parent class of all child exception classes. So whatever exception you throw, that can be handled by this class, right? Now, in this example, if you run the application and you throw anything, right? That is whether that is overflow exception or divide by zero exception, or it might be going to be your format exception. Every exception it is going to be handled. See, 10, I'm entering. Okay, let me uncomment this one. Let me remove the debugger so that I can show you the things very quickly. So I'm entering 0. See, generic catch block is executed. See, in this case, we are not getting divide by 0. Even though divide by 0 exception is thrown, but it is going to execute this catch block. Now again, I'm running the application. And this time, I'm entering a very big number, 6, 7, very big number I'm entering. Again, you run, you'll see generic catch block. Again, I'm running the application, right? So instead of a number, I'm entering ABC. Again, the generic catch block is going to be 18. So the point that you need to remember is the generic catch block, or you can say the catch block, which is taking a type of exception, going to handle all the exception that you can throw from your catch block. Even though if you remove this one, then also it is going to handle all the exception. Now, this is also generic. So whether you use this exception class, right, or whether you remove this, the functionality is going to be same. So in this case, if you run, then again, if you try to test all the different types of exceptions, then again, it is going to handle those all exceptions, right? This is also generic catch block, right? Now one more thing I need to tell you, start. So whenever you are implementing, right, whenever you are implementing the generic exception, it should be placed at the last. It should be the last catch block in the catch block hierarchy, right? That means if I put this catch block and if I try to put this at the top position, then it will give you compile time error. Why? Because now you just think that, so how the CLR or how the catch block handling is mechanism is work. So whenever we throw any kind of exception from the try block, it is going to check the catch block from the beginning only one by one. First, it will check the first catch block, then it will check the second catch block, then it is going to check the third catch block, right? So in this case, when we throw any kind of exception, the first catch block is always going to handle the exception. Now, why? Because this is the parent class. Then if this catch block handle all the exception, then what is the need of this two catch block? Is there any need? No. This is the why the compiler giving this error. What he is saying? Now he is saying that the exception that is thrown when there is an attempt to divide an integral decimal value by 0, a previous catch clause already catches all exception of this or super type exception. So he is saying that this catch block is going to definitely handle the divide by 0 exception. But previously you have one catch block which can handle this exception. Then why you are doing this? Don't do this. If you don't do this, then you can do like this, right? That's it. You can comment this and this can handle all the catch block. But what is the problem? What is the problem? If I'm using this one, right? If I'm using this generic catch block, then what is the problem is that you cannot provide error specific messages. So exception specific messages you cannot provide. Suppose divide by 0 exception occurred and you cannot provide this error message. Second number should not be 0. A format exception is occurred, you cannot provide this message and enter only integer numbers, right? If some overflow exception arises, you cannot provide, please enter some value with this and this range. You cannot provide that exception specific messages because one catch block means we can provide only one message and that message is going to be a common one, right? So what is the best way or how we can implement exception handling in our application is, first of all, you need to write the specific catch block and then you need to write this generic catch block as a backup of all exception, right? So what it means if none of your catch block, none of your specific catch block handle the exception, right? Generic catch block is there now. So for example, now if I run the application, if I enter 10 and 0, then this catch block is going to be executed. If I enter any value ABC, then this catch block is going to be entered, right? But if I enter a big integer number, then that exception cannot be handled by this catch block, cannot be handled by this catch block. But as this is the generic catch block, right? And it is the exception class. The exception class is the parent class of overflow exception. So it can handle the exception. Now let me run the application and show you this practically. See, my application is running, so I will show you all the scenarios. I'm entering the correct value. I'm entering 2 and 5. I'm getting the result as 5. That is fine. It's working fine. My application is working fine. I'm entering 10 and 0. I should get the divide by 0 error message, right? You can see second number should not be 0. Yes, my specific catch block is working fine. Now I'm trying to enter ABC value. I'm trying to enter a string value which cannot be converted to an integer number. And in this case, he's saying me enter only integer number. That is also fine. Now suppose you do not know any other kind of exception that might be arise in your application, but you want to provide some backup now. What backup means? If none of my catch block handle the exception, then my generic catch block is there. My catch block which is taking exception class is there who can handle the exception. Now I'm trying to enter a big integer number, and you can see as soon as I press enter, the generic catch block is going to be executed. So this is how you need to implement exception handling in your real-time application. First of all, you need to write the exception specific catch block, right? And last, you should place the generic catch block to handle to handle the exception which is not catched by the specific catch block, right? So now the question is, when should you write multiple catch block? See, basically two things. To print messages specific to an exception, right? If you want to print exception specific messages, then you need to use multiple catch block, and to execute some logic specific to an exception. Suppose a divide by 0 exception is occurred, and you need to write some logic which is specific to this exception, then you can write those logic here. And if some format exception occurred and you want to give a exception message which is specific to format exception, then you can write multiple catch block. And here, if you want to write some specific logic which you want to execute only when format exception is occurred, then you can also write this logic. And you should always write this catch block, generic catch block. Why? Because none of your catch block, if handle the exception thrown by the corresponding try block, then it is going to handle the error, handle the exception, right? So generic catch block, using generic catch block, you cannot provide exception specific messages. So some generic message you can provide. That's it for today. In the next video, we are going to discuss finally blocks, right? In case you need the text version of this document or whatever presentation I'm showing you, in case you need the documents, you can go to the description section of this video. I'll provide the link, and from the link you can get the documents. Thank you for